A very warm welcome to the new episode of Incan Insights. This is your host, Sumit Sharma Samir. This is a Nepal-based podcast, and if you are interested in listening to the thought leaders and authors from around the world, please subscribe to my channel. I'm extremely pleased to welcome Samrat Upadhyay in my show today. Born and raised in Nepal, Upadhyay is a Nepali diasporic author currently settled in the US. He's a distinguished professor of English and Martha C. Kraft Professor of Humanities at Indiana University. His works includes Arresting God in Kathmandu, The Guru of Love, The Royal Ghost, Buddha's Orphans, The City Sun, a novel, and Mad Country. The first Nepalese writer to be published in the West, he won the Whiting Award for his debut novel, Arresting God in Kathmandu, a collection of 9 stories based on Nepal. His first full-length novel, The Guru of Love, was a New York Times Notable Book of the Year 2003. In 2007, he won the Asian American Literary Award for The Royal Ghost. In the San Francisco Chronicle, Tamra Strauss compared Upadhyay to a Buddhist Chekhov. His story collection, The Royal Ghost, won the 2007 Asian American Literary Award, the Society of Midland Authors Book Award, and was declared a Best of Fiction in 2006 by the Washington Post. The book was also a finalist for the Frank O'Connor International Short Story Award from Ireland and for the Ohiana Book Award. His second novel, Buddha's Orphans, has been called powerful and beautifully told by Publishers Weekly, which gives it a starred review. The novel has been translated into German and Czech. It was also longlisted for the DSC Prize in India. It's such an immense pleasure to have Samrat Upadhyay on my show. Samrat, thank you so much for your time.
I'm glad to be here.
For my audience, we all know you, but can you please tell something about yourself in terms of your childhood? Where did you study and how did you, went and settled in the US right now?
So I grew up in Nepal. I grew up in Lanchor, right behind British Embassy. And I had all my neighbors were my relatives. So I was writing a little bit right then, and I actually used to write more in Nepali at that time, believe it or not.
Right.
And I especially remember writing one poem about all the different houses and my relatives and how nice they were and all of that.
Wow.
So I had a very happy childhood. Kind of a nuclear family. I only have one sister, and my parents emphasized education. A lot of relatives, and I'm saying this now because it just seems like now that sort of an environment, that kind of a community is a rarity. I mean, it's a rarity here in the U.S.
Exactly.
But it's even rare in Kathmandu now because the concept of neighborhood is beginning to disappear. Right? I went to St. Xavier's school, and so I was interested. St. Xavier's in Jaulakhel had a really good library.
Right.
So I used to check out a lot of books. I mean, we didn't have television at that time. Reading was the thing. I mean, that was our entertainment. We used to pass around books. I remember reading Mario Puzo's The Godfather, and the book was just passed around among all the classmates. And we used to sometimes we used to read the same thing.
Right.
I used to go to the British Library quite a bit. It was in Kantipath at that time. I used to go to the Indian Library. Used to read Amrita Pritam, Premchand. Also,
so you did have, gone through a lot of Hindi literature as well. So you enjoyed that.
Yes. I would say some of my most formative grounding was in Hindi literature, because my mother used to read, I don't know how familiar you are, but, my mother's generation, they grew up in magazines, some of these sort of tabloid type of magazines, Sarita and Sarika,
right?
But also a lot of novels. And we didn't make that much of a distinction between more commercial novels versus more literary novels, right?
Right.
So Premchand and Amrita Pritam were more, sort of high literary, but there are other commercial writers as well. and like the author of Kati Patang, Gulshan Nanda, and all of that.
Right.
So I was just a voracious reader. I was reading. I remember reading a lot of Hindi novels when I was in second and third grade.
Right.
And so I sometimes I like to joke that I still have that sense of melodrama from those novels.
Right. Do you remember when you started writing? When you were still a kid?
I don't. I mean, I don't have the exact. My earliest memories are actually from Lainchor, but I'm pretty sure I was writing before that. So I would say I was probably writing a little bit like from second or third grade. I mean, it's kind of like you at that time a writer at any stage thinks that they're like really serious writer, and I found that when I look back, I mean I went through like different stages of seriousness. So I mean I wasn't writing a lot, like let's say when I was a teenager, but I was making like some important leaps in my own understanding of the kind of writing that I like to do or the kind of literature that was important to me. And I think the same thing happened in college here. And now writing has just been like very much a part of my like sort of like my blood and bones.
Right.
But yeah, I came here when I was 21, and I thought I was, at the time, the idea of like that you could actually do something with literature or writing was not even a concept.
True.
So I thought I would study business, but I was bored. And I started, so one of the great things about, American system of education, especially the liberal arts, is that you can experiment, So I thought, well, I'm interested in literature. Let me just start taking English classes,
Wow.
And I was also interested in theater. So I just took some theater classes, and I just found I felt like I found my vocation there. So that's how the journey started.
Right. Very interesting. It's been decades now. I guess you have settled in the United States, and then you do back and forth, and you must have observed Nepali society pretty closely. What are some of the fundamental changes or shift that you see? I mean, it's a very generic question, but some of the things that you really think that have really changed, and that's sort of struck in your understanding.
Well, yeah, it's general, and I have to say it's kind of subjective, right? So I don't actually live in Nepal. I go there often enough. I mean, I go there often enough now that I feel like I get off the airplane in Kathmandu and I get in the taxi, and it's like I've never left, and I feel the way coming back.
Right.
So in a sense, the biggest change has probably less to do with Nepal, but more to do with how our world has just come closer.
Right.
So let me give you an example. So when I came to the US in 1984, when I called my mom in Nepal, I had to carry like $13 worth of quarters, go to the payphone, put the 13 quarters in, and then I would be connected to an American operator who would then connect me to a Nepali operator who would then connect. Right. So, and it was 3 minutes. So basically, I mean, that was the level of, and that's how far apart the world was, right?
Right.
It's not the case anymore. I mean, it's just like, we have just come, I'm constantly on on WhatsApp, Zoom, with folks in Nepal, like for example, the way we're talking right now.
Right. Absolutely.
So in that sense, even Nepal has shrunk. Even within its territory, it seems like Nepal has shrunk. And you can go to like some of the rural areas, and you'll find some of the technology is there. I mean, when I went on the Everest Base Camp trek, there are like really remote parts, but then there are like where we just connected, and I was talking with my friends here, high up in the mountains. So there's that. There's also one of the things is like, for example, the Kathmandu I depicted in Arresting God in Kathmandu is now no longer there. Right? So my book is actually an antique now.
Right.
because I mean the Kathmandu I depicted there is a walkable Kathmandu. You know, I talk about the wide open spaces, the neighborhoods, and all of that, and much of that has disappeared. I mean, you cannot walk in Kathmandu now. You know,
Right.
So you're
So, and some of your stories often explore themes of identity, belonging, and cultural displacement. I was wondering, how do you navigate these complex themes in your narratives?
Well, I think my narratives have changed over the years too. So if you read like Arresting God in Kathmandu versus my latest story collection, Mad Country, I feel like, you know, even though some of the themes are similar. I'm approaching cultural displacement, not in a kind of a sense of not in a binary sense, which was how we used to think before. You know, East is East, West is West, you know, and how they're colliding, that sort of thing.
Right.
Even that, a lot of that has sort of like become blurry for me now. So in that sense, it's changed, and in a way, it's a little bit more liberating as a writer when you don't have to like worry about those things. You know, like I'll give you an example. I gave a talk at the Godavari Alumni Association a few years ago. And so some of the St. Xavier's students came to like hear my talk. And after my talk, what I was talking about literature, they came and they wanted to talk to me about like Netflix shows, you know. So that's how it was, and I had to like sort of like educate myself right there and then about. So they're more from it. So in that sense, the sense of displacement also has changed a bit. Now, of course, I'm talking about like a certain strata of Nepali society. There are various stratas. You can still go to like, you know, very rural parts and people don't have access to all the technology and all of that. But so some of those things are, and also as a writer, my gaze has become, I've become a sort of a crazier writer, if you want to call it. I've you know, partly that's because I'm getting older and I'm looking at my life and I say, okay, I might have 20, 30 years to live. I just want to write stuff that's wild for me, that's interesting for me. So I think my new book that's coming out is pretty crazy.
Right. Please, can you please share some of the crazy stuffs out of that book?
Well, I think you'll have to get it and read it.
Sure, we'll know that.
But it has multiple points of view. It has multiple narratives. It even has a little bit of magic. You know, it has pretty like sort of larger than life characters. It deals with a dictator, some of which was like it's a book I started writing in 2014, before Trump was even like in the picture in the US. But I had written about Trump. I was writing about Trump, and I wrote Trump into that book.
Wow.
And then boom, you know. So in some ways, I was prophetic, you know, about what was going to happen. So
sure, we'll look forward to reading it as soon as it comes, Samrat. But as a writer living between cultures, do you feel that you struggle to sort of negotiate the nuances of language and cultural references in your work to ensure, you know, the accessibility to Nepali and American audience, or say global audience for that matter?
Yes, I mean, I think if you ask that question of any writer, you know, who's living elsewhere and writing about, you know, about their place of birth or the place they have left behind, you'll find that, and you know, I'm not the first one, obviously. I mean, Salman Rushdie wrote like an excellent essay a long time ago. Because he was, you know, he was born and raised in Bombay, and he moved to England. And he wrote about how for writers like him and me, looking at our culture is like looking at something from a broken glass or a broken mirror. Right.
Right.
Now, at the outset, it sounds negative, right? Because broken dosa laga yasto, okay.
Right.
But what he's saying is that it actually, the broken mirror can afford us like really interesting angles and unlooked at angles,
Right.
that can be instructive. And I think that's true. There's no guarantee for any writer, even if let's say if you're a writer based in Nepal, there's no guarantee that your perception or your judgment, might have a ring of truth, right?
Right.
Because sometimes outsiders can show us ways.
Right. Right. So perhaps sometimes, the blend of both could help sort of have an objective view as well.
Yes.
I was wondering to ask this question to you. Who do you read these days and whose writings have influenced you much?
Oh my God. So I'm actually reading, this is, I got this book from the library. So I've been reading, John Fosse, who won the Nobel Prize last year, Morning and Evening.
Right.
He's a very different writer than I am. He writes without punctuation, mostly, sort of run-on sentences, but really fascinating. There's a kind of a cadence to his prose that I'm loving a lot. So my reading thing is fairly eclectic.
Right.
I should also say I'm a fairly impressionable reader, and so whoever I'm reading at the moment, if it's a good writer, I just and I want to write like that,
Right.
For example, Cormac McCarthy is a great influence. And whenever I read Cormac McCarthy, I want to write like him. I'm reading a number of different. So this is another is a new writer, American, Nana Kwame Adzebrenya. His
Right.
novel was recently a finalist for the National Book Award. I think he's a fascinating writer. So I'm reading a lot, because I'm also a teacher, so I like to keep up with what's happening in the literary world.
Right.
My influences were when I was beginning to write were mostly Indian writers, because Indian writers were writing in English at that time. So
Right.
Salman Rushdie, Anita Desai, Rohinton Mistry, these were the people that I grew up with. And then once I started studying creative writing a little bit more seriously, then it expanded a little bit. I was influenced by Irish writer like William Trevor, South African writer Nadine Gordimer. So there's a real range to it.
Right. So, your novel, The Royal Ghosts, delves into the intricacies of Nepali society and politics. What inspired you to tackle such a complex subject, and what challenges did you face in its portrayal?
Yeah, so politics has been of interest to me, but politics as only sort of translated to the personal, right? And I think Amitabh Ghosh is the one who said, in South Asia, all politics is personal.
I only spoke with him last week, in fact.
Oh, did you? Yeah, he's a friend, and he's also been influenced. He's actually been to this house here.
Right.
He was here he was doing a lecture. So in terms of the Royal Ghost, I was here at that time when the Maoist insurgency began, and it was a shock, as it was for a lot of Nepalese, even for Nepalese, because I was talking to my parents, and even for Nepalese in Nepal, it was who are these people? Where did they come from? So as a writer, obviously, and it was it was psychologically quite traumatic being here and to reading all these news, and of course sometimes only getting half a picture, not knowing what was happening, all the killings that happened. So as a writer, how does something happen and why it happens is always a point of entry for
Exactly.
any writer. So that's where I thought, well, I need to write about it. And yeah.
Many of your characters, grapple with the existential questions and moral dilemmas. How do you approach character development to make these struggles authentic and relatable?
Yeah, I mean, I do believe that in some fundamental level, our experiences are universal. And that's one of the reasons that I tend to read literary work from all over the world, because every time I read it, I find that, well, someone, here's a character who grew up in Zimbabwe, for example, very different from my upbringing, but in some ways the experiences are the same. The sense, our desires are the same. Our sense of family is the same.
Right.
The need to make a living, make a good living, even to have luxurious items, all of that is the same. So I try to think of that. I think that's in the back of my mind as I'm creating these characters. And always, I try to have the character have the intensity of the character desire is kind of important to me, so that the story gets moving right away.
Right.
And that's something I like to impart to my students as well.
Right. And I also see that you sort of explore the intersection of tradition and modernity, and how do you navigate these tensions in your narratives?
Yeah, and so like I said before, that is used to be a little bit more binary, cut and dried before,
right.
but that has shifted as well. But I'm also struck at every time I go to Nepal and I'm spending with my family there, that in some ways things haven't changed, the whole
right.
some, especially some in some ways the caste system is still fairly entrenched, especially when it comes to weddings. The Brahmins are looking for bone, family and that sort of a thing. There's so in many ways that sort of a thing is still, the emphasis on family, despite earlier I talked about how the sense of neighborhood is not there. But the sense of family is still quite strong, a lot stronger in Nepal for certain than it is in the US.
Right.
We recently had a relative who was hospitalized, and there were 10 people in the hospital room when, my wife was telling me that when she was on WhatsApp, doing a video WhatsApp with them, there were 10
right.
people in the hospital room, all surrounded by, and that's something that's really hard to find here. So in some ways it's the same, but then there are the modern influences have also crept in. I see a lot of youngsters wearing shorts when I walk around Kathmandu. A lot of young people holding hands, which was unthinkable,
right.
even 20 years ago. So.
Samrat, perhaps we are living in the pre-modern, modern, and post-modernity at the same time.
right. Yeah. That's a good one. Yeah, I might use that actually.
So, what advice would you give to aspiring writers, particularly those who are navigating multiple cultural identities in their work?
It's something I think about. So when I go to Nepal, I also give talks and do workshops. And I want to say sometimes I think young writers can be sort of too worried about how the world is going to receive their work. Whether they're making all valid points or whether they're even saying important things.
Exactly.
And I feel that's a fairly sort of a misguided way to go about it. You should write what's in your heart, what your passion is.
Right.
And you should be bold in your writing. You should be, it's sort of like a one life to live kind of a thing. Right? You be
Absolutely.
bold in your writing. You push boundaries in your writing, and you'll make mistakes. There might be, mistakes, but it'll all be worth it, right? So then you need to read a lot. It's hard to be a writer if you don't read, and if you're not familiar with like all the different ways that people are having literary conversations, through works of literature. I think a lot of sometimes it's just like one word or one phrase or one image in another writer's work that can just be a source of inspiration for an entire, novel for you. So
exactly. Yeah. And do you have any rituals of writing? Do you have any habits that you follow?
I'm usually a morning writer, but I have sort of like become anti-ritual now. So I do. I actually was writing on my iPhone when I was trekking up in the Everest area.
Oh, okay, interesting.
And that's something that I had never done before.
Right.
Nowadays I write in airports. I also encourage my students to not think that you need like a large amount of time in order to write. Don't think that you need 2 hours before I can. I need to have a meditative thing. I need to settle in and all of that. 5 minutes. You can tell yourself I'll write 2 sentences or 4 lines of poem in 5 minutes, and you'll be amazed at what can happen within that.
Right. The kind of world we are living in right now, it's getting more and more complex, as I understand, because of the rise of technology and then, the interrelationship between the states and so many other factors. How do you see the, literature really evolving at this point of time?
Well, I think literature is in a very fine place. Yes, it's true. Technology does mean that people might read less, but I'm always constantly amazed at if you take my students as a microcosm, and these are like these students have like access to all kinds of technology. They're well read. Nowadays students are reading like only like, let's say their interest is a lot in fantasy fiction, for example, but they are reading quite a bit, and they're fairly astute. So I am not as pessimistic as some people are. There are always people who are saying, well, people are not reading and all of that. I found that that's not true at all, at least in terms of they're also, so my students do make references to TV shows.
Right.
And movies.
Right.
But then I do that too these days, because I'm also watching, because it's so easy to make
exactly.
But I think literature is even more important now, given the kind of sort of the political turmoil that we're seeing in the world. So I think we need that sort of, the literature provides us with a very meditative space in which to consider these things.
Right. So, your next book, which is, it's due on 2 months' time, I guess.
No, it's actually, it'll be later this year.
Later this year, right? Yeah. Okay. So, will you be in Nepal at that point of time to launch a book, and it's being published?
I think that's what I'm saying. So if somehow the book is able to be presented in December, I'll definitely be there. If it's in spring, I'll have to make a special effort, but I'm going to try to be there. So I'll be in conversation with with people, publishers, about how that is done. So.
Right. Yeah. Samrat, we wish you good luck with your new project.
Thank you.
We look forward reading to that book, which is, as you have indicated, a bit of complex and crazy.
It's very long. It's very long. I should warn you. It's so don't commit yourself to reading it right now. It's 700 and some pages. So
Well, I think even with all sort of work, we can finish that in a 6 months time.
Well, thank you. Thank you
But thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for
It's
engaging.
indeed a real pleasure.
Yeah. Be in touch.
Sure, I will.
All right. Okay. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.